of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tistero. Chapter 67. Monday, Part 7. Yagi Toshinori admittedly wasn't used to feeling such a wide-spanning range of emotions within a 5-minute time frame. Really? Sure, in the heat of battle, you could expect to flit through a different aspect of anger, rage, despair, incredulity, and fear, desperation, insecurity, anxiety. That was only natural. That was what kept you alive. That was what helped you to save people, no matter the cost. In this instance, however...
Oh, my son, we've been expecting you. Please won't you take a seat?
He'd never gone from deliriously happy. He'd had Shotoku in his arms. He'd been delighted by their jaunt. He'd given him a gift. He's always treasured the experience of seeing him smile jubilantly. To bewildered, he clocked Dabi-kun and his nephew at the third bay window, their shovels raised, to actually concerned. They'd not been smiling. Nemuritan had similarly looked on edge, and now, after Tomer had approached him, seemingly so sweetly, and made escape impossible. Well, not actually impossible, but he didn't want to upset his favorite eatery owner by launching himself through one of the windows. Or walls. He was almost too good at throwing himself through them, it seemed. Here he was, somberly walking past civilians, and into the newest area, which boasted virtually deserted tables and the knitting nook booth, to find Mimi-chan smiling at him demurely. Her girls, all wonderful women in their own right, stood behind her in a row whilst the cats continued to scuttle about and play in their humanless enclosure. Why did he feel as though he was at an interview?
Sit, dear. That chair's for you.
Or something even more sinister? Nodding, his smile a little wobbly, Toshinori cleared his throat a little awkwardly and sat. The teens were now telegraphed by either shoulder, their shovels brandished as the other pro bowed her head and moved to stand by the eldest woman, her head bowed.
Now, it has been brought quite surprisingly to my attention that you have intentions towards our Shoto-kun. Is that so?
Blinking, his expression owlish, his cheeks aflame. Yes, ma'am,
And those intentions,
she cut in, her steel-gray eyes suddenly sharp, her line of friends offering him similarly intense gazes.
What are they exactly? I'm not meaning to pry, you understand.
She smiled, her wrinkled, hard-working hands laced together upon the table. A table where a singular muffin sat, quite innocently, between them upon a saucer.
Just think of me as a representative, or perhaps a spokesperson, for the greater cafe family at large,
she mused, her adorably rounded cheeks plumping with a smile that should have put him at ease. It didn't.
For you see, as astute, intelligent, selfless, and talented as Shoto-kun is, he has had to shoulder the responsibility of being an adult from a very young age, and as a result, he's been too preoccupied with the wants and needs of the people he cares about to stop for even 1 second to acknowledge his own thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs,
she advised. Well, who could argue with that?
And so we, as his unofficial family, feel as though a little chat is warranted,
she furthered, her eyes widening a little at her words.
I have biological children, you know, but I've not seen them in years, she furthered. That is sadly the way of things these days, isn't it, girls?
She asked, the 4 women behind her nodding in solidarity.
Shoto-kun, however, has knitted us together, given us a safe space to enjoy ourselves, and given us access to similarly official grandchildren whom we love very dearly, she stated, her head nodding at the teens. Therefore, what was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to act when my 2 oldest grandsons came to me with a simple request? A request born out of love to protect a man who has gone above and beyond any sense of duty for the betterment of people that most of society would look down on and forget about.
she asked.
Now, please, don't be concerned about the shovels.
She laughed to sound lyrical.
They're not here to intimidate or harm you in any way, for surely they couldn't with you being who you are.
She added, her chin now resting upon those threaded fingers as she looked deeply into his eyes.
They're merely for digging and burying things, aren't they?
Kayama Namori considered herself to be a woman who knew who she was, who loved who she was, and knew what she wanted. Sure, she'd had her ups, joining Yue. Her parents were married even now. She'd discovered she was demisexual. And downs, joining Yue. Her classmates had sneered at her exhibitionist nature and clothing choices. Her parents hated each other, their spiteful words ringing across her nightmares, and being demisexual, most people saw her as loose. However, overall, things were coming up Nimu-chan these days. She'd debuted as a hero and was working with her best, formerly only, friends. She'd helped to take out a few bad guys. Sushi the cat had been a faithful doting companion to them all, even though she was his primary caregiver, and she'd contented herself to that. Until May. Oh, May! The way she sighed that name made the month sound like a beautiful woman she was in love with, didn't it?
And yet it was thanks to May and everything that had transpired since then. It was nearly August. How was that possible? That so many new wonderful things had happened to her. She'd found an actual woman, vivacious, giggly, beautiful in every way going, to love. It had been a process she'd live all over again in a heartbeat. She'd met Shouta, a total doll, enjoyed food she'd never come across before, and broadened her range of defensive skills. She now had a place to go outside her small studio apartment where she was accepted, where people older and younger looked happy to see her, who accepted her and enjoyed her flirty sense of humor. The same place was where she'd met Shiritoko Tomoko, then unofficially adopted by older people who doted on her and praised her sense of self. And younger, the three teens were sneaky, devious, and beyond cool. Her life fuller than what she'd ever imagined. That was one of the reasons why she wanted to spread the love around. That was one of the reasons she'd looked at Shouta and thought, wow, how could someone who looked after everyone else not have a partner to look after him? That's why she'd asked about his love life in the first, because, hell, if he was asexual and were completely opposed to forming any kind of romantic attachment, well, that would have been the end of her snooping and the beginning of ensuring that she, and everyone else who admired him, gave him the love and support he deserved in a way that he wanted and was comfortable with as friends. No exceptions! However, to hear that he'd just not even try to see who he was, what he wanted, or what could make him happy, because there was no denying that the man's heart was 10 times the size of his cafe. In terms of relationships that weren't just familial, well, something had to be done, because God knew he wouldn't consider himself important enough to invest time in. That self-sacrificing wonderful dope. And so the dating pool had formed, and damn, she knew theoretically that she was a genius, but as even Alma entered the scheme, she wondered why exactly Mensa wasn't demanding that she join them. It had all seemed like such a good idea at the time. They're merely for digging and burying things, aren't they? But now, as she was stood here, I do understand that this is a shovel talk as in, you wish to, warn me about the consequences should I somehow upset Shouta-kun as my significant other. She was, You're getting good, Hanji-san.
She felt, you all think that I have a chance with him? Really? Overjoyed! Letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, she found herself fanning in her eyes as Mimi-chan, the deer, blinked, the teens muttered, and the four women lined up behind their leader similarly started to tear up. How was the big luck this adorable? God, she thought all of her meddling was going to lead to a major upset. Firstly, she was worried that she'd landed the stern police force lieutenant in hot water. Now Masa, a little sheepish, had told her that Shouta had diffused that situation before he and Sanzakun, their mascot, he'd accept that eventually, had left. Because of course he had. Secondly, when the group chat shared about the daters had been updated by Sanada, she'd literally squealed, and knowing that Kenji-san's blood was no longer on her hands, she'd shared the recording with Tomoko. The teens had listened in, shared a look that had shaken her to the core, gotten up from the gaming area, and approached Mimi-chan. She'd never seen a group of pleasant, happily chatting women become so serious so quickly. She'd genuinely been worried. She'd gawked when the group had left and returned with gardening equipment and told her to keep the issue shush. But now, at the genuine delight dancing across the blonde's face, she realized that she had nothing to worry about. He'd rarely felt this overwhelmed, really, and sure, it was a little bit early to celebrate anything. But here he was, sat before someone who saw the cafe owner as a son, and backed by the older teens whom, all cat-bed joking aside, couldn't have asked for the better father figure. And he knew theoretically that Hitoshi had had a hand in all of this too. That adorable little scamp! They all cared enough to approach him, some whom they all knew predominantly as a symbol, a man with powers that none of them could realistically challenge, to tell him in no uncertain terms that they would find a way to challenge him should any harm come to Shouta. They all thought that he and the younger man were compatible enough, that Shouta did feel about him the same way, that they were both mutually interested enough to... Oh! Standing, he'd whipped the teens up and into a hug that was tight but not crushing, shovels and all, their chests pressed to his.
What? Hey! What?
Domarak gasped, his eyes wild. Not cool, man! Dalby furthered, his bewildered feet a good foot off of the glittery linoleum floor, both of them wiggling as he held them and tried desperately not to gush over how lovely, how thoughtful, how beautiful this gesture was. You really think this much of me? He asked the pair of them, only doubling their struggles whilst Nemori-tan, bless her, was snapping photographs, and the elderly women, mostly tearing, came over to join in on the embrace. You'd accept me as someone who could be more involved in your lives with your guardian?
This doesn't mean anything, Ji-san!
Nana's descendant tried, his eyes glaring at the smartphone capturing his defeat.
And just 'cause you don't think the shovels were enough to keep you in check, you'd best not forget about Araraka-san!
He called his will to fight against the hug, slowly dwindling. Yeah, he works at UA now, and he's made real good friends with that pro, you know him? Power loader? This guard Dean. So warm, just like his heart. Toshinori was willing to stake a great deal of money on that. Harry's glower softening when Nomori kisses his partner's cheek. He will have equipment that'd mess with you if you messed around with Sho. You hear me? He furthered with an outrage he didn't feel, his eyes rolling when their first Nii-san similarly gave him an affectionate peck. Smiling at them gloriously, his laughter joyous, the sun-kissed man called, Boys, I'd gladly hand myself over to you for such a punishment, should I ever do such a hideous thing. He told them, Thank you for loving him enough to speak to me like this.